Hey Nick, thanks for joining me here on the summit. I I thought about having you here because you've done something that I think a lot of people think about doing, but they hadn't done properly. And I've known you now for maybe 10 years from working together in St. Louis. And I've watched this transition of how you've become the video networking guy, right? I see you online. All the realtors in St. Louis rely on you on how to get clients and how to use video. But you don't have 8 million followers on YouTube. You don't have 19 million followers on Instagram. But you do have something that most people want, which is a strong network. And a lot of that network was built by you going on video on social media platforms, whether that was going live, doing webinars, but you used video and social media as a platform to build a strong business with the right people. So that's why you're here today. I want to make sure everybody knows why I brought you here because I think what you've done is amazing. So give us a little bit of your background of what you did prior to doing this so that people have some context as to why you chose this route.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, thanks first of all for having me on, Ron. It's good to see you. So yeah, I think first of all, one thing I always want to be clear about is I'm actually very introverted, and I use a lot of video, and so people are always like shocked to hear that. I think, which is unfortunate because I think video can be one of the best things out there for introverts. It certainly has been for me. So one of the things that I've always been very reluctant to ever accomplish on social media is to have a giant following, right? Because I don't like the idea of all these people watching me all the time and wanting these updates from me and needing to see my personal life and things like that. And I know there's ways to do it that maybe don't feel that way, but what I decided, I was reluctant. I didn't get on social media at first. I was one of the later, it came out right as I was in college. I was kind of the perfect age for it. But I really held off, and finally I did it because of business, right? It's like, okay, you gotta get on Facebook, you gotta get started here. So the background, back into what you're asking is, I've been pretty much an entrepreneur my whole career. I went to school for entrepreneurship, so that makes sense. I worked at Sears for 9 months when I got out of school, and then I quit one day, and the next day I started my first business. So been kind of doing it ever since then. And so it's mostly been marketing. I worked for a company in college where we did a lot of door knocking, a lot of flyer passing out. We're selling paint jobs. And so my first business, we started doing the same, knocking on doors and passing out flyers. And eventually that evolved into doing video marketing, mostly for real estate agents. So it's probably been about 8 or 9 years now of using video. And where it started was just looking at Facebook. Facebook had released their video advertising platform around that time. And it kind of hit me immediately. I was like, wow, this is like TV ads, but for small businesses, right? Companies that couldn't afford, television advertising. And so I think, it still continues to be an enormous opportunity. I think it's one of those things that the average person overlooks way too much, especially because they think about it in really narrow ways, right? Video is social media, video is advertising. Video can be a way to build relationships. It can be a way to wish somebody happy birthday, one on one. It can be, all these different things. And the more you start to accept that, the more you can start to build these networks and these relationships, I think.
No, I think that's cool. So, what are some of the unique ways you've used video?
Yeah, so there's all kinds, right? I think first and foremost, I was really early with using live video. There was a period, so I quit drinking almost 5 years ago now, so it's been a while. But I had a show. It was called the Bourbon Friday Show, and that was a lot of fun. This was like 5, 6, 7 years ago. We did it every Friday for 2 years. I think we did 100 episodes. It's out there as a podcast. You can still listen to it, but that was early days of streaming. Like people didn't really have a good playbook for how to use it. And so I had a friend of mine, he had started an event. We're getting together on Fridays, drinking some bourbon, hanging out after work. And it sort of evolved into like, hey, why don't we just have a conversation in front of a camera and sort of see what happens? And after a few of them, it was mostly just fun. Wasn't like it went viral. We didn't have a ton of people watching. But what was really cool about that, and this gets into the networking part, is when you say you have a show, and I think you may have even been the person that kind of gave me this idea, years ago. But when you tell somebody you have a show, they will meet with you, and they don't ask a lot of questions, right? Like they're just, hey, I got a show. You want to come on my show? Okay, yeah, right. And these are the kind of people that will not get a cup of coffee with you, right? Like they don't know who you are. They don't want to meet with you. They don't want to waste their time. But if you give them a platform, they will almost always say yes. And so we started out, I was in a startup incubator. It's obviously where you and I met down at T-Rex in St. Louis. And we just started asking the startup founders, hey, you want to come on, sip on some bourbon if you drink. You don't have to, obviously. And we'll talk about your startup story, what your business does, how you help your customers, kind of tell us how you get it up and running. And then we'll try some bourbon. And it was a lot of fun. It was stressful too, because this was back before the technology was so easy like it is today. So we had, the lights, and we had, this software we had to install on our computers to manage the stream and all this kind of stuff. You don't have to do any of that anymore. But in terms of, the access, I mean, it was amazing. I met the top startup founders in town. I met all the investors, people that, again, I would have trouble getting a meeting with. I remember interviewing our current mayor, of the entire city of St. Louis. I mean, that's just one example. I can talk about others, obviously, but I think, the point is, I love that concept. There's several different layers here that you can do, but anytime you can use video to either, build a relationship, offer something of value. Like another example is I've offered to film videos at people's events before for free, because it's something they don't know how to do, right? And now people are more familiar with it, but still, even to this day, if you have some basic video skills, you can open a lot of doors. You can offer a lot of favors, and working with the right people, building those relationships, that goes a long way, right?
Mhm. I'll tell you something that came to mind. I'm like, yo, if I was a speaker and I had like 100 conferences I wanted to speak at, I bet nobody's invited that conference organizer or the host to come on to talk about the conference that's coming up in 6 months or 9 months.
Right.
And if I interview them on my show, they'll probably take an email from me down the road. If I say, yo, if you ever need a speaker on this topic, you should probably hit me up. You know, that would
Oh
be
yeah.
a great way to build strong relationships with conference organizers, because they need to promote the conference anyway. They want to be in front of people that are in the target audience. If you're going to be a speaker at the conference, that means that you have their audience too, just like they have your audience. Dude, that's genius. I didn't
Yeah.
think about that, but
There you
five
go.
minutes
Well,
in, you already dropped the gem. We can end the interview right now. Thank you for
I know.
coming.
Just go do that. Yeah. No, I know. I mean, well, and this is, I mean, Ron, I'll tell you, man. Like, once you know how to use, like, once you can look into a camera and not think too much about like how people might be judging you on the other side of that camera, and just talk and just communicate and not be uncomfortable with it, which is just a matter of practice. And a lot of people are like, it's mindset and you got to do all these things. Like, no, just start simple, do really basic videos. Don't even show them to anybody, or send, like, I tell people, just send happy birthday video messages to one person at a time, right? Like, Facebook tells you every day whose birthdays are today. Boom, the Facebook Messenger button is next to their face. You click it, you record a 10 second, you send a video. They love it. I mean, they love it, right? Like, who doesn't like hearing happy birthday on their birthday? So you do that sort of stuff first. That alone builds relationships. Like, there's very little, if you're Facebook friends with like some of these higher, more influential people, you'll be one of the only people to say happy birthday that way to them. They will think about you for weeks, like your face is in their head now, right? So you can start with stuff that's that easy, and as you get more comfortable, what happens is then the possibilities open up, right? So the kinds of stuff we're talking about here is, interviewing people and doing a show. If that sounds overwhelming, if you're watching this and you're like, oh my God, like, yeah, good idea, but how the hell do I do that? That's okay. Don't start there, right? Start simpler, but it's weeks, maybe a few months, and all of a sudden, things that were hard, overwhelming, complicated, they're not so scary anymore, right? It's like anything we learn from scratch. I just think with video, we've procrastinated, a lot of us, for so long that we built it into this mountain, and we kind of told ourselves these stories about why we're not. Like, I've had a lot of people that be like, I have a face for radio, ha ha ha, I can't do video. And I'm like, what are you talking about, man? Like, anybody, that's your face. You meet with people all the time. You don't like cover your face up when you're, it's like, wear a mask, right? Like, I don't get it. It's just, you're just talking to people. That's all it is. So if you get past those things, which are normal, but you get past them, then the ideas come up, right? Like, you can only be creative when you're pretty, in a place where you can use your tools effectively, right? If you don't know how to use the tools, how can you be creative with them? So this is just one thing, right? I mean, so yeah, interviewing. I mean, yeah, I love that, right? Get out there and just, I mean, these people probably don't get invited on a lot of podcasts and shows. They're gonna be pumped, right? They're gonna be excited to do it, and they're gonna. I mean, you're gonna have people that you couldn't get a hold of that after a 20-minute interview are like, yeah, tell me more about what you do. You had some good questions here. Did you ever do any presentations? Like, do you ever speak on these? Oh, it just so happened to. You know what I mean? Like, it's just so natural, it's so organic. And then even if there's not a spot at their event, but you gave them some attention, you helped them out, they will go tell other organizers about you, right? They'll help you network your way through the system. So yeah, I think that's an easy one. I also, I think that I'll just kind of take another step here with what I did on Facebook to kind of tell the whole picture. There's one of the things that you get when one of the cool things about Facebook is that, and I have a very much love-hate relationship, to be clear, with Facebook, right? It's an incredibly powerful tool. I'm not a fan of everything they do by all means, but what's cool is when you do send a request, friend request to somebody, they will see who they have in common with you. And so what I actually have done over the years is I first went out and I did little favors for super influential people, right? So for example, like there was a guy coming to St. Louis, was hosting an event, big time influencer in the real estate space. And so reached out, said, hey, why don't we record some videos at your event? Now, I didn't just record a video of the event. I also said, hey, why don't I interview all the speakers at your event, right? These are also very influential people. So now I'm doing a little 10-minute interview after their presentations out in the back room. Nothing fancy. You can record this stuff with a phone nowadays. We had to have a better camera back then, but phones are good enough now. And so then you've got like 10 different people that you've built a relationship with, right? Again, they appreciate it. You've got multiple video clips you can put out with every single one. Every time you drop another clip, you tag them. They're seeing them, they're seeing all this engagement with their posts. Their followers are seeing, the layers here, they just keep stacking up. And so with one event, one favor to one person, technically, I actually was able to build like 10 different relationships with 10 highly influential people in the same industry. And then once they've all connected with you, now I can just start reaching out randomly to influential people in that industry, and they see these connections in common, right? They're not all going to say yes, but some of them do, right? And now the network grows. And so the one thing I warn you on, right? Because I think a lot of people, as you start to make these kinds of connections, like it's very tempting to just like aggressively reach out. Like, okay, that conference organizer accepted your friend request. Hey, can I speak at your conference? Like, don't do that, right? We've all experienced that, like the spammy friend request person. I just had one like yesterday, and I'm getting like multiple messages. I'm like, I don't know who you are yet. But let the algorithm and let your content build the relationship for you, right? So what will happen is when you make an initial connection request with somebody, they'll see more of your most recent posts. Like Facebook does that on purpose, right? So it'll show them, like, if you are dripping videos out there on a regular basis, it'll take your last 5 or 10 videos and it'll just stick them right in front of that person. And so I think you let that happen, give that a week or two. You connect, you comment on their posts, right? You do a little bit of engagement, again, not spammy, aggressive stuff. Hey, I want to speak at your conference, but just reinforcing their point, share an anecdote, typical small talk, relationship building type of stuff. And then after a couple weeks, now they know you, right? And what I've found is now you can reverse engineer it a little bit. So now I can start to put out those posts that say, hey, I can speak next quarter at 2 events, and here's the things I speak on. And if you're looking for a speaker, let me know. All of a sudden, now this organizer is looking at your post going, maybe I should look into this guy, which is obviously way more powerful than cold reaching out in the first place, right? So it takes time. It's definitely something you got to build a little bit. But once you're there, this is what I talk about with my Facebook, my network at this point. I don't, like you said, I don't have millions of followers, and maybe that's embarrassing to some people because I'm not a big time influencer. But there's a difference between being an influencer and having influence, right? And I think that the influence that I have with the people that I have in that network is amazing. I have connections across the world at this point. And I can just put out a single Facebook post and be like, I want to meet this person. And people will be like, yeah, I'll hook you up, right? Which, to me, that's way more valuable than having a million random people following me.
Yeah, I think you make a great point regarding networking, right? Because that being influential is way more, like, we call people influencers on, but it's really one-way influence. You see what I mean? It's like them just putting out content and a bunch of people watching. But influence is when you have interaction, in my opinion, 2 ways with particular people that can lead to a particular result, right? Not just buying your course, but it can lead to a particular result. A lot of influencers, the people that we call influencers nowadays, they're really just selling stuff, right?
Well, right.
They're
Yeah.
more influencing people to buy more than anything. So I think what you're doing is super duper duper incredible. And you mentioned, oh well, what if they're shy? Man, these are public speakers. They're not shy. They get on stage
Right.
for a living. Like if
Shouldn't
they're
be.
afraid to
Shouldn't
get
be.
up and
Right.
talk about their topic, I'm like, dude, what are you doing? You're in the wrong profession if you're afraid to get on video because that's what they want. They want the video in front of 5,000 people. So having a conversation on on live or using social media as a platform should I would believe would come natural to them, right? One of the things that may come up is the technical side, right? What are some of the simple things people can do technically to make video an easy transition for them?
Yeah, yeah, that's a big question. That's a common one, right? So let me give you a rule that we teach all of our students first, and then I'll give you some suggestions on the tech, which is, you should only ever buy a piece of equipment or software when you've already encountered the problem that that tool solves, right? So like I'm not gonna like my favorite example of this is people go out and they buy gimbals for their phones, right? Which is a device that stabilizes your phone when you're running around recording, right? And the funny thing is that like modern phones, you don't even really need them anymore. The technology is built into the phone is so good that it's pretty stable, even if you're kind of bouncing around while you're recording. So a lot of people go out, they buy a gimbal, and then it's a reason to procrastinate. Right now, it's like, well, I got to learn to use the gimbal before I make any videos, otherwise they're not going to be any good. So I've seen very extreme examples of that so many times, right? People like entire studio setups, lights and fancy cameras and microphones and, stuff I do have here, but that I built up over many years, right? And they buy it day one, they've never made a video, and now they're stuck trying to learn to use it. So I'll start with that, right? But what I will tell you is there's definitely some things you want to think about. Number one is your lighting. Lighting is really important just because it really in my opinion, I don't think the viewer cares too much about your lighting in a lot of cases, but you will, because it makes you look better, right? So I think lighting can be one. Now the good news is all you really have to do is just make sure you turn toward the light, right? So if you're in a room with a window, I mean, as long as you're facing that window, your lighting is probably going to be pretty good. Natural light tends to be very flattering. Obviously our eyes are kind of tuned to the sunlight. It doesn't even have to be a sunny day, cloudy day. That the light is even better sometimes because it's sort of diffused and smooth, and there's no shadows or anything like that. That's what'll get you is the shadows, right? So if you have overhead light, it's about as bad as it can get if you have any sort of creases or crinkles in your face because it highlights them. So that's one thing. Now, if you want to invest, you can put a little bit of money. I think a basic ring light, $30 on Amazon is a starting point. Beyond that, there are softbox lights you can invest in, up to a couple $100s. We have it's called a Godox, Godox. It's a decently affordable brand, but in sort of the semi-professional range. That's what I'm using over here. So that's like, 2.5 feet around. It's a big bulky light. It's not something you're going to put in a small space. But it gives you nice flattering light and you have total control over it, right? So lighting is a big one. Audio is also really important. In fact, I think audio is more important than the lighting because people will listen and pay attention to a video with clean audio longer than they will one that has a good image, but it's hard to hear what you're saying, right? Which is kind of common sense. But so I think audio is really important. Again, that is going to be about two things: how far you are from the microphone and what is in the room with you, right? So that's where we get into if you're close enough to the mic, you're going to get pretty clean audio. That's more important than the kind of microphone you use, right? So if you want to start investing, I mean, obviously we're both using, nicer microphones here. Mine is mounted above my camera right here out of the shot. It's a Rode microphone. They make a ton of really good microphones, a range of prices. But this is a shotgun microphone, so it's directional. So what that means is that it's mounted in a way that it points directly at my mouth, and it doesn't pick up sound from the rest of the room nearly as much. That is really helpful if you're in a room with a lot of hard surfaces, right? So that would be the other part I mentioned earlier, which is what's in the room with you. If you're in a room with carpeting, I got a big plush piece of furniture over here in the corner, which is mostly for video recording, but it also helps with the reducing the amount of echo, the reverberation in the room, which is why, when you see sound studios, they got the foam on the walls, right? That's the point of that. So you can put foam on your walls, or you could just be in a carpeted room, right? You don't have to overdo it. That's a big part of it. So if you ever record in a kitchen or like an office, right? A lot of offices, there's a lot of hard surfaces that automatically will make your voice echo. and will make it harder to listen to. So I think those are a couple things to think through. Honestly, a lapel microphone for 15 bucks you buy on Amazon, and just buy one that works with your phone, because you're probably going to plug it directly into your phone. Great. But here's the thing. This is my warning. I've already given you a couple items you can think about buying. Every single new thing you buy is another thing that can fail, right? It's another thing. Like the number one issue we get with microphones is, oh crap, I recorded my whole video and it wasn't plugged in right. You know, we've all done it, right? So you get done, you recorded for 5 minutes and there was no audio, right? Or like we've all seen the live video or there's no audio. You can't hear them, right? That is a risk. So I always say, look, start with what you have, test it out, and kind of see what you can do. Now on the software side of things, I mean that's a laundry list, right? It's going to really depend on what you're doing. I will give you just a couple of my favorite tools real quick. One is StreamYard. StreamYard is amazing for live streaming if you're really trying to do that and being able to do like live editing. You know, you can throw graphics in there, you can share slides, you can play video clips. One cool feature is if anybody comments, you can click on the comment and it'll automatically put it on the screen for you. We didn't have StreamYard when I was doing the Bourbon Friday show. I wish we did, you know, because it's pretty cool. That's a big one, right? Also, their startup story is amazing. They launched at the perfect moment. It's probably like the fastest growing startup in human history. I mean, I think they were bootstrapped. They didn't raise any money, and they sold for like $200 million in like 2 years, which is just like, I can't imagine, right? You know, no startup funding, and you know, $200 million 2 years later. So good for them. That's one. Let's see, CapCut. You know, that's going to be about if you like TikTok or not. If you're comfortable with TikTok, CapCut's amazing. It's the same company. That's why I bring that up. Some people don't like that. But editing wise, you can do almost anything you can imagine just on your phone, which is crazy. I'm not a big fan of always editing on my phone. But since CapCut came out, it is just so powerful and it's so effective, and it can do almost anything. If you're going to edit something, or even if you need to record and you want a teleprompter, it has a teleprompter built in as part of the app. That would be a great option as well. And then the last thing, I know people will ask about cameras. I'll tell you, the truth is at this point, your webcam and especially the camera in your phone is probably good enough. Like I have a DSLR camera in front of me that I'm talking into right now. It's a GH5, a Lumix camera if you want to look into that. But the reality is, I mean, my phone, it's got an 8K camera, which is like, why do we need 8K? We don't need 8K, obviously. But for most of what you're going to record, that's good enough. And actually, when I do vertical social media, which is most of the social videos I put out anymore, I record with my phone, even though I got this camera right here. So again, I think the main takeaway there, it's a lot of detail. Hopefully you're taking notes if you're listening. But I think the main thing is start with what you have, see what you can do with it before you go buy anything, before you start to invest in. And even if it's free, even if it's a free app, it's just more to learn, right? And that just creates a bigger learning curve to get started. This is different. I mean, I wouldn't have necessarily said it that way 5 years ago, but I think as of today, take your phone out, see what you can do with it, and you might be happy.
I think you hit it right on the head. I mean, a lot of the things you were talking about, I'm like, yeah, I did that. I got the
Right.
Osmo gimbal. I never use it. You
Yep.
know, I got all this stuff. I got the special lights that are over here in the closet. Right. I went and bought all
Right.
this crap. And I'm like, dude, what am I doing? Right. So that was the first part. Like we do sometimes want it to be perfect. And guess what? It's never going to be perfect. And I'm going to
No.
tell you why. Because they're going to come out with a better camera next year. So even if you go
Right.
buy the newest camera this year, they're going to come out with a better camera. And if you get the most complicated software this year, they're going to come out with a more complicated software next year. So you're never going to like have the ultimate setup. It's always going to be improving based on your usage, right? So that's the first thing is use what you have. Like you said, your rule was use what you have until you run into the problem that the new thing solves. So if you just want to go live on Instagram, you'll need nothing special until you run into somebody saying, man, I can't see you and your video's blurry. Use the Instagram live button on your phone and just go live. If you want to record yourself prior, record it prior. I mean, I think you made it very simple for people. If they need lighting, use the sun. Mm-hmm. Right? Just turn towards the sun, turn towards the window, make sure the lighting is in your face, right?
Right.
They don't need a special microphone or anything like that. Usually the microphones and the cameras, and their phones are good enough. If they want to buy a mic, they can get a simple one. Dude, I mean, you gave them like in 4 minutes, you gave them from the simplest thing up to the most complex. They can go get all of that stuff, but it's not necessary. Um, One of the biggest things I thought you mentioned was the importance of good audio.
Mm,
And
right.
um, I used to date a girl who was like, she just always wanted to argue. And I used to say, hey, look, I can close my eyes, but I can't close my ears. Right. and, and, so, and I'm like, and that's kind of the same thing. It's like,
Yeah.
look, people cannot watch your content, but still listen to it. Right. So
Hmm.
if something is ugly, I can just listen to it and still go.
Yeah.
Right. But unless I'm a master lip reader, I'm not going to turn the audio all the way down and just watch it. So the audio, your ears, you can't turn off your ears. So that's one of the most sensitive senses that we have. So the audio needs to be good. I think that that's
Right.
really, really, really important. It doesn't need to be perfect because everybody hears differently, but it can't have all these pops and background noises. I was listening to an interview the other day with from a live event with 50 Cent, the rapper. He was talking about his business. And
Yeah.
in the left ear of the audio was a buzz.
Oh, geez.
And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, dude. And I wanted to turn it off, but I'm one of those tech nerds. So I just ended up putting in one AirPod and moving all the balance to one side because I
Yeah.
wanted to hear what he had to say. But the
Right.
average person is going to just turn that off, right?
Yeah. I mean, well, in audio, if you think about it, it's like audio has this ability to make us uncomfortable. I think like when like you said, right, you can close your eyes. So, oh, it's scary. It's, that kind of stuff. But there is a certain element of like, I mean, in fact, there's a lot of people who have like certain conditions. I like one of my sisters in particular. If I'm like, if I scratch my beard across the room, she will yell at me. She's like, stop making that noise. I'm like, I didn't even know that was making a noise. You know what I mean? So like, there's these sensitivities to audio that a lot of people have, and some to that level, some sort of like the rest of us is just sort of bothered by it. But you're right, it is significant. And what's interesting about the most recent research is that a lot of people actually prefer less polished video content. So the stuff that feels like you just whipped your phone out of your pocket and you sort of started talking to people. That is, people are watching those videos longer. They're spending more time with them, but they still have clean audio, right? Like they're not watching the ones where the person takes their phone. I mean, and that's the difference, right? It's the feeling is that they just took their phone out of their pocket, but we know they didn't, right? We know they're wearing a microphone. We know there's a setup. They're in a particular space. They probably recorded the video 5 times, and this is the fifth take that worked out the way they wanted it. But it feels organic, right? It feels natural. It feels unpolished. And I think that's the key, right? The audio on those videos is almost always very clear, right? Like you watch any of these influencers, they've all got that the Rode Go, right? The Rode Wireless Go that just clips to your shirt. Those things are great. And they've got pretty clean audio, and it's not perfect. And I don't think perfection's never worth even shooting for. But yes, clean audio is clearly more important than the image you put out there.
Well, I mean, another thing is that I like about even your setup here. You don't have anything flashy in the background. So some people have we did a summit interview where the guy had a really elaborate background, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think yours is a bit counter to that because you can use both, right? Yours is more focused on you. So there's not a lot of stuff in the background, but the person can focus on you and the content that you're teaching,
Right.
right? And it makes it very simple for you to be able to produce stuff really fast. You don't have to go
Right.
click a bunch of buttons. In which,
Yep.
if that's the set that you want, I'm glad that we were able to show two contrasting sets, right?
Yeah.
One person has a very elaborate set. You have a very simple one that someone else may be like, dude, I can just do what Nick did, which is
Mhm.
beautiful. So let's talk about the content, right? So I
Sure.
know a lot of speakers, they know their topic, right? What are some of the things that you've done as a speaker? You most people don't know that you do a lot of speaking gigs too.
Oh yeah.
Um, what was the biggest transition from doing long form, 45 minutes, to getting it down to a 2 minute or 3 minute video that you can put on social media?
Yeah, yeah. So I think this is something, and really we're nowadays we're talking about 30-second videos. We're talking about these shorts you can put on you. Like if you want to build a YouTube channel, for example, the number one place to get subscribers right now is in the shorts, and they have to be under a minute to even post them. So, yeah, the way I think the easiest way to think about that, if you already have presentations, because, a little more background is I teach basically for a living, right? So that, again, you're right. That's why my setup is sort of so simple. And so I have like, I don't know, 100 different 1 hour presentations we've developed. Like we used to develop a brand new 1 hour webinar on a different topic every week. We did that for like 2 years. So we probably have 200 of these, right? So I have lots of long form pieces of content that we've either recorded or we could record. The way I think about the short form version of that is if you had somebody in the audience talking about their takeaways, that's a great way to think about the short form pieces, right? So if you had somebody sitting there and you said, hey, what was your number one takeaway from this presentation? They're going to give a 30 to 60-second answer, hopefully, right? Hopefully it's not 5 minutes. Sometimes it is. But you want the ones that are concise. And then, hey, those are what you make your shorts about, right? So I think, there's software out there like Opus, for example, that will take your long form content and they'll just cut shorter pieces out of it. And that's not a bad idea, especially, and I'll tell you, if you do speak on a stage, that's amazing to cut that into pieces, right? Because it gives people immediate authority. If they see you in front of an audience and you got the microphone on or whatever, they're going to pay more attention to that because they can tell there's other people already paying attention to it. So that's kind of a fun hack. In fact, sometimes when I record, when I'm presenting, I'll intentionally record in such a way that I get the backs of a bunch of people's heads in the shot so they can just see there was a lot of people watching me, right? But if you're making stuff just one off, I think that the way to think about it is to just look at it as, okay, what would be the 5 key takeaways? What are the things that are most important? And just make a short about each one, and again, you always want to, with the short stuff, you always want to start with a hook, right? So you always want to start with like, a question that you're answering, or a bold statement can be a big one, right? So if, for example, maybe it's something like, if I did a presentation on, video equipment, like I was saying earlier, the rule that I talked about, right? That like what's my number one rule I teach our students when it comes to buying equipment? And the point is, when I'm scrolling, if I see that and I am curious about that question, now I will stick around and watch it. If I'm not, I'll scroll past it, right? That is good. You want that to happen because that teaches the algorithm who to show the video to, and it builds in the idea that the people it's going to show it to are going to be interested in the rest of the video, right? So the hook is really important. Something that summarizes in less than 3 seconds, ideally, what the whole video is about. And then 30 to 60 seconds, I think, is a good kind of target range. And honestly, just talking into a camera is fine. It doesn't have to, you can do walk and talks. You can walk around the neighborhood and answer the questions that way. The one popular format, if you want to try it, is like pretending like you're on a podcast, which now I see all these shorts and I'm like, I don't think any of these were real podcasts. It's just so somebody sits there with the headphones on and the microphone in front of them and they look off camera like they're talking to somebody, a lot of those are not real podcasts. They're just people doing that, right? But again, it's the credibility factor, because again, you see the person go, oh, they were on a podcast. That must mean they have something worth hearing. So that can help. But when you're first starting, I think it's basically, if you just pick 5 takeaways from your presentation, sum them up in 3 seconds at the beginning, and then answer them in 30 to 60 seconds, you'll have a lot of content already, and that's a good way to get the ball rolling.
Yeah, I think the key is just to get started, right?
Oh, of course.
I think, just get started making content. They don't have to do 200 long form, but I was amazed. I'm like, you did 100 new webinars?
Dude,
I'm like, dude, I'm doing the same one every week. I'm not changing.
We should not have. In hindsight, it's like hindsight's 2020, right? It was the pandemic, man. Things were weird back then. But yeah, we did a whole 1 hour new presentation, professionally designed slides. We practiced the stuff. We got a lot of leads. It worked, right? But yeah, we were basically giving our service away for free. That was not the smartest idea.
Yeah, dude, I'm sitting there like, holy crap. So no, but the key is that you practiced, and the mission was important, right? The mission and the message were important to you, so that you made the investment. And I think that's, as a speaker, that's a big thing. You got to believe in the message and the mission, and then the money will come. You'll make money if the message is impactful and people follow you on the mission. So right. I think that's really, 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 really important that you put in the work. And then now you can take some of that work that you've done, you can chop it up into smaller things, but you put together 200 presentations. You got a lot of things you could talk about, right?
Mm-hmm.
You got a perspective on 200 different things, right?
Oh yeah.
So that makes you a thought leader. That's why all these real estate agents follow you, and they want your help because you've looked at it from 100 different perspectives, which is cool. I think another thing that you have that we have in common, I should say, is that we're both industry outsiders, right?
Mm, right. Yeah.
You weren't a real estate agent,
No. Yeah.
so but you brought a different perspective that they hadn't thought about, and you were able to gain their trust as an industry outsider, right? I'm not a
Right.
professional speaker. I've spoken, I do it a lot, but that nobody would ever say Ron's a professional speaker. They'll say he's an entrepreneur, right? So I come with a different perspective
Mm-hmm.
on how to do things. And it's like, oh yeah, I should probably, consider that perspective when they see my stuff.
I think it, yeah,
So
I think it could be a good thing, and it is funny thinking back to the first year or two. I was trying to get the attention of real estate agents because, yeah, I mean, it's a very, cliquey industry, right? It's a very tight knit community. They know each other really well. Trust is a really big, important part of it, which I totally get. But yeah, that first year or two, when you're an outsider, it's like, there's sort of this attitude of like, if you're still here in a year, I'll pay attention to you, like if you can survive what we're going to throw at you for a while. And we did, and we stuck around. And yeah, it's like once you get past that, which can be hard for a lot of people, but then you're the person with the different perspective, which is super valuable, right? And so I think for me, at least, it's that I can talk to you as a real estate agent like your customer, right? Like I see everything like your customer sees it, not like all of your competitors see it, right? And so it definitely has had an impact where we're able to give people ideas and insight and strategies to try and messaging and all this stuff that they're just not really hearing anywhere else, right? Like a lot of their gurus are not talking about sending happy birthday video messages. They're talking about trying to go viral on social media, because like that's what a lot of the other industry experts are doing and trying. So I think that can be a major advantage, but I do think it can be a little bit of a grind when you're first getting started.
well, I mean, I think it's part of being in business, right? You got to win over people's trust,
Oh yeah.
whether you've been doing it. If you don't have the results, right? I've never spoken in front of 8,000 people, right? So I'm not going to come on here and say, let me show you how to get in front of 8,000 people.
Right.
Dude, now I just lost everybody's trust, right?
Yeah.
But if I said, hey, this speaker here, I got them booked in front of an audience of 5,000, 6,000. This speaker, I work with them to do this. Now I'm living on my own trust, right? I can build trust from my own stories and be able to make videos that are relevant and honest, right?
Right.
You don't want to get on video and start talking about stuff you're assuming, and then the audience is like, dude, that ain't true. Like, you're like, well, here's how you do real estate. If I saw you make a real estate video talking about here's how you can become the top
Right.
real estate agent, I'm like, Nick, you don't even sell houses, bro.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it's all video specific, right? I mean, yeah, that's a great point. I think, and that's the funny thing is like a lot of people, that's what they do, right? They like read it, they take a course, like I'm in a lot of these coaching groups, and I don't like to think of myself as a coach, but I do a lot of coaching, so I'm basically a coach, So I'm in a lot of these Facebook groups with other coaches, and it's just funny how common that joke is, of like the coaches teaching the coaches how to be coaches. It's just like this never ending pyramid basically of people teaching each other based on other courses so it is common. So yeah, I think when you do resist that, because there is this sort of natural pull to be saying what everybody else is saying, it stands out, right? Like it's a distinguishing feature to be, wait a second, that guy's he's not saying what I'm used to hearing. He's not saying I'm going to make you a millionaire real estate agent. He's saying, oh, he's going to teach me how to use video to become a millionaire real estate. That's different, and I think that's niching, right? Like that's how you develop your ideal customer, and the more you do that, the more of the fit. So one thing I didn't mention about the social media earlier that kind of comes into play here is because I am so careful about doing those things, I get friend requests like almost every day from real estate agents, right? Like this is my ideal customer. Like, so imagine you get to a point where like you're getting friend requests from the people who organize the conferences you want to speak at. That's kind of the same equivalent here. And some of that is because the way I put out content and the people I choose to engage with and the way I talk about myself Facebook puts my profile as a recommendation in front of real estate agents who have been clicking on stuff that has to do with video, so they tracking all this, right? The algorithm's learning from everything they post. And so, I mean, yeah, it's not it may be a little bit of a stretch, but it's not crazy to think that if you're honest about where your expertise is and you're really honed in on your ideal customer, you will probably start to see some requests and connections from the people in these spaces who run these organizations, who run these events, right? And I mean, heck, it doesn't get much easier from there, right? I mean, that's pretty awesome when you have these algorithms just feeding you your ideal customer, right?
Oh, 100%. What did we miss? We've been on now for about 40 minutes. We
Yeah.
covered a lot. I mean,
Oh yeah.
if someone is watching this, they can get started right away. Like just with what you've already given them, right? Reach
Yeah.
out and build relationships. Using social media to build relationships is what I'm taking away. Not using social media to try to become famous, but to become
Mm-hmm.
known by the right people, right?
Right.
I think we should title this "How to Be Influential Instead of an Influencer." That
Mm.
would be. I think that's a great title for what you've talked about. What did we miss?
Well, I mean, we've done a pretty good job, I think, covering the gist of that particular approach here. I guess what I will say is, what we didn't talk much about is kind of like these other aspects of where you can be using video as well. So I think that one last thing I'll just add that I think is just helpful to think about is we talked a little bit about video messaging, right? So like happy birthday video messages. There's a lot of psychology and neuroscience, which I won't get too much into right now, but we can all see that when you can see and hear someone, it feels like they're there, right? Like that's why we used Zoom during the pandemic, because it was the closest thing we had to a face-to-face meeting, even if we got burnt out on it, right? But like it was still better than having to be on a conference call with everybody. So video automatically is a win. You have to think about it that way, right? So I think as you are, so we're talking about using this kind of build relationships, all that is going to take time. So if you're in a situation where you're like, I got to get booked, I got to get on a stage in the next month, just think in those moments as well, like where you can incorporate video, because again, it's going to have the same kinds of impact, right? So if I'm going to reach out to a conference, I wouldn't necessarily put a video message in the very first email, but maybe, it just depends on what you're doing. But think about incorporating it into those places as well, right? So if you're sending an email, can you include a personalized video message, right? Say the name of the person you're talking to. I actually have a whiteboard laying on the floor over there that I'll write their name on and hold it up on the screen so it's very clear that I'm talking just to them. That kind of stuff. We think too much of video as a performance, and we need to think of it more as it's just a new form of communication, right? It's just a new way, and it is really new, right? I mean, especially this one-to-one type of stuff, it's only been around for maybe 10 years or so. Most people still don't know how to even use it, and it just stands out. It won't as much anymore in a few more years when everybody's using it, right? So right now you get all the benefits of it being video, and you get the benefits of being one of the first people to do it. And so think of those places too, right? So as you're doing your outreach, as you're doing the connection requests and all that, just think about where you can put your face on a camera and put that in front of somebody. And I think that's it. So I think, to sum it all up though, as you've said multiple times, Ron, it's like you just get started and start simple. If something feels hard, you're probably just starting too far down the path, right? Like if you're learning, if this is, we as adults, we don't learn the right way anymore, right? We see something we want to do, and we look at somebody who's been doing it for 5 years, and we go, hey, what are you doing? Let me go do it tomorrow. Instead of saying like, hey, where did you start 5 years ago? What was the first thing you ever tried, right? That's what you got to do. You got to start simple. And if you kick yourself for not having started 3 years ago when you started thinking about this as a possibility, just let it go, right? Like you're not going to go back in time. Like you just don't beat yourself up on the sunk cost of what the time wasted and therefore make it harder for yourself today. Start where you should have started 3 years ago. Start simple video messages, simple videos with no editing, and then let it build. And don't be afraid to ask for help, right? I mean, obviously, I'm here to help because that's what I do for a living. But there's a lot of people making videos. You probably have colleagues, friends that have started to experiment with some of this stuff. Don't be afraid, right? Ask them to interview you, right? Can we go live and you ask me a few questions, and that'll help me get my toes wet, getting started with this stuff. And hey, they have content now. They're probably going to be appreciative of it. So start simple.
You made me think of something. You don't even have to make public videos.
No.
right?
Right.
Someone sent me one of these and I thought it was genius. And I asked them, and I'm going to give the person, I'm going to give you all the tip. Open up your LinkedIn, right? And then click on Messenger in LinkedIn and then record a video, right? You can record a video and
Mm-hmm.
send it in LinkedIn Messenger. It's the only place. If you're inside of LinkedIn and the web, you can't do it. But
No.
on the phone, you can send a private LinkedIn video. Imagine reaching out to an organizer and say, hey, I saw you have this conference coming up. I'm a speaker. I would love to be the backup speaker,
Yeah.
right? If someone backs out, here's a link to some of my stuff. They've never gotten a video message before. I promise you, they've never gotten a video message. They're getting all these other goofy spams in LinkedIn with fake likes and like fake introductions. Imagine sending that video or a video on Facebook. It can be done privately. It doesn't even have to be done publicly. That's what I do.
Yeah.
That's going to be a game changer. Because now I
Oh
don't
yeah.
have to worry about someone commenting. It's going directly to the person I wanted it to go to anyway. So, no, I
I
really
love it.
appreciate you taking the time today to share what you've learned. Real quick, before we go,
Yeah.
how do you get your speaking gigs?
Oh
Because I
man,
see
it's
you
been,
speaking all the time, dude. I
yeah,
see you
yeah.
speaking all the time.
There's been
Yeah.
a bunch of things, like we've used different database. I have an assistant that helps, that obviously is a big help. So he's found different databases. I think he's been using you guys' services as well in that process. So we got just outreach, cold outreach, right? We've got a lot of what I get is what I've talked about, right? It's the fact that I haven't necessarily targeted like the people specifically organizing conferences, but I've been invited to speak at conferences for the companies that I, like Berkshire Hathaway had me come speak at their real estate conference, actually 3 different sessions, which is a ton of fun. So yeah, I think that is a big part of it. And then here's a big thing: just constantly telling the marketplace that you're available to speak, right? I mean, I think it's marketing, it's gotten to a point now, there's so much crap, right? There's just so many posts, we see so much content every day that unfortunately you have to say things more often than you used to. It just goes in one ear out the other, right? Because it's just so much stuff. So I relatively frequently am posting on social and just basically telling people like, hey, if you need a speaker, like, one that tends to work is like, I've got, I have availability next month to speak at 2 events. And these aren't necessarily always paid, right? Because again, a lot of times the free stuff leads to paid and all that sort of thing. But I'll just put that out and then, yeah, I'll get a message from somebody like, hey man, you want to come speak at our conference, our event? One that's been really productive for us recently is we were reaching out to all of the chambers of commerce in Missouri because they're always looking for speakers. And what was kind of funny is we ended up reaching out and I got invited to come speak at the state level conference for the people who run all the chambers, right? So I'm in front of a room full of all the presidents of all the chambers across Missouri. Obviously, that led to additional speaking opportunities, right? And I didn't even know that conference existed, to be honest, right? We were just like, hey, we'll come speak at your local chamber. And the woman's like, we need somebody at this state level thing we're doing. So that was really cool. So yeah, that's a big, part of it. There's a certain degree of cold outreach, but it's all of it together, right? I mean, it's connecting with the right people. It's constantly telling the marketplace that you're available. It's telling them what you would speak on. I think the videos, the examples, right? Like all these presentations that we have made and we put out there. And then the last thing I'll say is just make sure that when you do that stuff, you're always incorporating that you're interested in speaking and how they can get a hold of you to do so, which again is sounds obvious, but a lot of times we miss these things, right? So at the end of a lot of my presentations now, I have a slide with my contact information. And it just says, hey, if you want to book me to speak at your event or talk to your organization, here's my info. And you just don't that kind of stuff, you don't know when it's going to pay off, right? Like I'll get random emails every so often from somebody that saw me 6 months, 12 months ago, a couple years ago. So yeah, it's a lot of different things. I don't know that we found one that's like our go-to at this point necessarily, but especially when you combine it all, because what people will do is they look you up, right? So if you reach out to them, they're going to look into you. They're going to click on your social. They're going to Google you. If they see a lot of good stuff, a lot of good content, examples of you speaking at other places, like that's another one. Always record yourself when you speak. Like always, I forget sometimes, but like you bring a little lapel mic, stick it on your shirt, throw your phone on a tripod in the back of the room, And it doesn't matter if it's a great recording, just get it recorded. You've got content, you've got an example of you speaking, you've got a room full of people clapping for you, all that kind of stuff. Like that all goes a long way. And again, this is the stuff they find when they go look into you.
No, that's dude. Those are gems, super
Good.
duper duper gems, because it all started with the video. By you being online,
Mm-hmm.
it gave them the what we call event planner insurance, right? They got to test you out before they hired you,
Right.
right? And then you used a small gig to get the bigger gig. You went to the small chambers, and they ended up bringing you to the state level chambers. And I mean, dude, gems, gems,
Good.
gems. Nick, thanks again. I really appreciate it, man.
Of course.
We got to do more work together, man. I'm sure there's some real estate agents in our audience that could use some of your help. So we got to do more work together. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. It was fun.